Trump wins the debate, but was it enough? Biden wants to end oil. Lieutenant Bobolinsky holds a press conference, and our lockdown battle for freedom continues. Welcome, friends. Day after the final debate, welcome to the Buck Sexton Show. Great to be here with you. And I got to tell you, things are a little bit more tranquil than I think any of us would have expected at this phase of this political race. Maybe the left really did exhaust itself a little bit this summer with the riots and the mayhem and the looting and the arson and all the stuff that they were doing, right? Maybe they got that out of their systems. And, you know, I'm just going to say it. It's not as fun to break into a shoe store or go steal some designer clothing in the name of social justice when it's dropping down into the 50s and then into the 40s. You know, when it gets cold outside, marching in the street, you know, you need the marchers there to make it seem like a mostly peaceful protest. Marchers don't want to be cold. They like it when it's 75 with a you know, a gentle breeze. That's when you really want to do the social justice stuff. You don't want to do it when you got to all of a sudden start thinking about wearing some mittens. So they maybe got a little bit ahead of themselves, used a little bit more of their energy then. But I also have a new theory about this, which is that they realize the Democrats the word has gotten out, and you saw this with the ACB hearings. You saw this with the way they've been responding to Trump recently. They can't act like total psychopaths right now. I mean, they can suppress, they can lie, they can do all the things they're doing, clearly, in the media in particular. But the visceral, obvious, viral video Biden supporters acting like barbarians, that stuff is not a good look in a general election. One thing to get the base all fired up in the election year, but it's not a good look for people who actually want to win those independent voters and that small slice of the pie that's going to determine who's the president for the next 4 years. So my theory is this. They're lying in wait right now a little bit. They're being a little bit more coy than perhaps we had anticipated. But if Trump wins this election, and there's already some early indicators this is the case, then the insanity gets dialed all the way back up to 11. Then the insanity is unleashed that's been building up right now because there are still all the left-wing crazies out there. They're just lying in wait. They've been told by the people who write the paychecks for the placards and the U-Hauls that deliver the social justice materials and anti-cop weaponry that shows up at these protests. They've been told, hey, guys, we got to fool enough well-intentioned people in a handful of battleground states so that we can be in power, and then you can run wild and no one's going to stop you. But for right now, cool it. Calm down. I think that's what we're seeing because ACB hearings, pretty quiet. What we've seen in response to Trump lately, on the streets at least. I'm talking about the activism. I'm talking about the really extreme actions that the left was taking all summer. I mean, from May, June, July, August, this country was in the grip of a left-wing terror. And then suddenly in September, it started to fade out. And then we get into October, and all of a sudden, like I said, it's colder. But they've realized they're not helping their buddy Joe Biden. There's only so much he can do to hide the actions of his base if they're going wild right before people are casting. And as we know, tens of millions have already voted. So that brings me then to the actual debate last night. I want to focus on the parts of it that I think are the most important for all of us between now and the actual election. Yes, Trump won. And I appreciated that when I said Trump won on Twitter, the president retweeted it. So then, of course, my timeline on Twitter was full of all kinds of madness. But the president agrees with me that I agree with others that he did win that debate. And this was more of the Trump that I had expected to show up at the first time around. He was completely calm, cool, and collected. He was in control of the facts. He was in his way, in a Trumpian way, very presidential. He was a guy that you feel like in the boardroom, if you had a dozen people gathered together in some fancy corporate office having a big meeting, he's the guy that everybody's going to be looking to and listening to. That's his demeanor. That's his, and that's who he is. Biden was just kind of a feeble mess. I don't know what else to say. Yeah, he was reasonably coherent with the usual talking points. There was nothing particularly compelling about any of the stuff that he said. We had really heard it all before. But seeing these two candidates on stage, Trump just has much greater magnetism, charisma, vitality. It's just not comparable. And if we weren't having this election, and this was what really just ran through my mind last night as I was watching it live, if we weren't having this election in a bizarre year of COVID, Trump would win every state he won in 2016, plus 3 or 4 additional states. Definitely would pick up New Hampshire. Trump would win. I think he'd have a shot at Minnesota. He would win states that he didn't win the last time. But because of COVID and what the country's going through, I've been correct. I think we'll see. But my assessment all along is this is going to be a very tight race. And yes, the Electoral College, no one can really guess exactly how that's going to shake out. But we know that it's going to be a small number of votes in a small number of states that determine this thing. All the polls, all the numbers show us that. So this is going to be a fight to the finish. Was what Trump did last night on stage enough to move the needle? The truth is no one will really ever know. He did not get a knockout blow against Biden. There was no moment you watched that and you said, oh, Biden's finished. And given what's happened with the Hunter Biden revelations this week, I do think there was that possibility. I think that there was a realistic chance that Biden was going to get so tripped up and it was going to be such a mess up there that it would have cost him in the general in a way that we could trace. We could go from point A to point B. Didn't happen. In fact, one of the biggest surprises last night was that there was not a single moment of real challenge to Biden on the Hunter Biden stuff, to Joe Biden on the Hunter Biden stuff. He managed to skate past it. Now, I don't want to spend much time talking about the moderator. If you read my Twitter timeline, you'll see how I feel. I thought she was fine. She was fine for 15 minutes. And then for the next 15 minutes, it started to get a little bit, wait, why are you only interrupting Trump? And she really did only interrupt Trump. I think there were 2 or 3 interruptions of Biden answers the whole night. And then she asked some questions that I found really distasteful and biased, like, I forget what exactly the verbiage was, but, hey, Trump, you're a racist, right? So why are you a racist or why are you not one? And then the climate change question, which I'll get to that in a bit. This is just, journos have to do this to prove how smart and serious they are. They have to ask about climate change, which, if you even look at the polling year in and year out, it's like the 20th most important issue to the American people overall when they list out all these issues. I mean, it's really, a minor. It starts to get up there with like the eliminating the carried interest loophole or something. I mean, yeah, some people care, but anyway. So there was no knockout blow against Biden. There was one moment where I think he created a real vulnerability for himself, and that has to do with oil, and we'll get to that. But I saw last night as an opportunity for people to get one more glimpse of really what we already know about these two guys, who they are. Donald Trump is not a politician. Sometimes he can be a little bit unpredictable, to put it mildly. And he has his own way of doing things. But the guy is a fierce fighter. He's got a tremendous amount of leadership quality and a tremendous amount of magnetism, personal charisma. And he's done a good job for 4 years. They can say that he's been awful on COVID all they want, but those are just talking points. He's done a good job. Joe Biden is essentially the the quintessential, completely replaceable and, duplicative Democrat politician. Joe Biden reminds me of a whole bunch of other guys. I mean, you could switch out Joe Biden with Senator Murphy from Connecticut or, Blumenthal. I mean, 2 Connecticut guys up there. You switch out Joe Biden with any number of, but the only difference is Biden's been in the game much, much longer. But just another Democrat, nothing special, nothing powerful, and has that whole old school, hey, I'm just your friend sitting at your kitchen table, and I'm from Delaware, and sometimes my voice starts to almost get a little folksy, like I'm maybe from the South, but I'm really from Delaware, man. Hey, man, and I kind of throw in these phrases to make it seem like I'm just one of the people. And, it's all so staged and phony, and it's worked for this guy, though, for a long time. There's a reason why cliches are cliches. It's because people use them because they often work and they're useful. But that's what you got last night with Joe Biden. I mean, there's no vision. There's no reason to vote for Joe Biden other than he's a Democrat who is not Donald Trump. So that's it. I mean, that was the choice you saw on stage last night. Now let's dive into who threw a punch where on what, how much it matters. I got a crash course recently at home title theft. And look, you better pray this crime never happens to you because it can ruin you financially. It goes after your most valuable asset, your home. Here's what happens. The legal title to your home, to all homes, they exist online. They're in servers. They're up in the cloud. Cyber thieves, hackers get access into those servers, and then they'll use a quitclaim deed to kick you off your home's title, put themselves on, and then you'll just get stuck with the payments. Sometimes you won't even find out about this until the eviction notice arrives. You've got to go with the experts I trust to create a virtual barrier around your home's title with Home Title Lock. All you have to do is go to HomeTitleLock.com and use the promo code RADIO for 30 free days of protection. That's HomeTitleLock.com, promo code RADIO for 30 free days of protection. You can also check online to see if you're a victim of this crime and don't even know it yet. HomeTitleLock.com, promo code RADIO.
Look, all he does is talk about shutdowns, but forget about him. His Democrat governors, Cuomo in New York, you look at what's going on in California, you look at Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Democrats all, they're shut down so tight and they're dying. They're dying. And he supports all these people. All he talks about is shutdowns. No, we're not going to shut down, and we have to open our schools.
We do have to open our schools. Trump's right about that. The science backs him up on that. Democrats have allowed schools to remain shut down, have demanded that schools stay shut down because they think it's in their political interest. But I think this is one of the strongest areas for Trump last night. And as you know, I don't care when anybody, what the polls say or anything else, shutdowns and the restoration of normal life from this COVID new normal they're trying to enforce on us of being scared of each other, separate from each other, masking up all the time. This is the most important issue in the country right now, bar none. And Biden tried the usual last night of blaming Trump for everything that's happened during COVID. He tried the usual, 200,000 deaths are Trump's responsibility. How many deaths would there be if Joe Biden was in charge? And what would be acceptable? This issue has just been so ripe for demagoguery all along, and Democrats have exploited it at every opportunity. That has been their approach, which I know is completely unsurprising, but we should at least see this for what it is. The president listened to the experts. He did what they wanted him to do at every phase, and he's now allowed the states to deal with this in a state-by-state fashion, which is in keeping with common sense and with the law, mind you. A lot of places are using what are effectively police powers and to create they've got a state of emergency, and they're using police powers under the state of emergency to quarantine an entire population at different levels. And it's kind of a few layers all coming together. That's not something the federal government should do. Think about what the Democrats are really arguing for here. Why should Montana, where I was for a bit this summer in August, why should Montana have the same policies about COVID that New York City has? That makes no sense whatsoever. But then again, you take this a little bit further and you say, why should 25-year-olds have the same approach to COVID as 75-year-olds? That also makes no sense. And people say, but the 25-year-olds give it to the 70. No, if you're going to be in contact, it is in fact entirely possible for people to live much of their life without being in direct, sustained contact with people who are at high risk. That is very possible. But Trump made his case on this last night, and it was what we needed to hear. He said, this is what I've done. This is where we're going. We got vaccines coming. We're putting out the fires one by one as they come up with the increase in cases. Now, I'm going to continue to make this argument, but, New York has still very low cases, and the only thing that makes sense to me, and it doesn't mean we're not going to have any more cases. Of course, we have cases day in and day out, but we're not going to see a huge spike because it burned through the city so quickly and so viciously that there's a lot of built up immunity, and that the most susceptible people to COVID, many of them, a large number of them already got it, and many of them tragically already died from it. So I don't think it's going to happen. And we're going to test this out. They're going to say it's because of masking. We masked during the shutdown in March and April, and the virus was still ripping through the city, ripping through the tri-state area here. So we'll test that out. I'll return to that. What does Biden, what does he say? I mean, he keeps talking about how Trump is somehow responsible for the virus and for the shutdowns, and Biden saying he's going to make things better, but he's going to make things better by shutting us down. So it doesn't make any sense. There's an incoherence to the Democrat position on all of this. And really all they have to say is mask, mask, mask. And I remember when just a few months ago, all they had to say was testing, testing, testing. Remember that with Nancy Pelosi? Testing. You got to test and trace. And a lot of us said, well, hold on. When a virus has gotten to this level of spread already in society, you're not going to be able to trace it at all. And when you're testing a lot, you're just going to end up finding a lot of low-level, unimportant cases, because you're not just testing people to go to the hospital now. You're going to test all over the place. Somebody has a sniffle. Oh, I got to go to the corner and get a COVID test. Remember when testing was supposed to be the thing that saved us from this? Now we test all the time. Now it's masks. It was washing hands in the beginning. You remember that? That there was a time, I have not forgotten, when the exhortations for the public to wash their hands were the single loudest thing that was being said by Fauci and the gang in the early days. They believed that was really how we were getting it. It wasn't even airborne or aerosolized the way that we've now come to believe it is. Biden wants you masking up all the time. Play 12.
220,000 Americans dead. You hear nothing else I say tonight. Hear this. Anyone who's responsible for not taking control, in fact, not saying I take no responsibility initially. Anyone who's responsible for that many deaths should not remain as President of the United States of America. We're in a situation where there are 1,000 deaths a day now, 1,000 deaths a day. And there are over 70,000 new cases per day. Compared to what's going on in Europe, as the New England Medical Journal said, they're starting from a very low rate. We're starting from a very high rate. The expectation is we'll have another 200,000 Americans dead between now and the end of the year. If we just wore these masks, the president's own advisors have told him, we could save 100,000 lives. And we're in a circumstance where the president thus far and still has no plan, no comprehensive plan. What I would do is make sure we have everyone encouraged to wear a mask all the time.
That's their plan. Yell at everybody to wear masks. Mask shaming. They think that will stop this. This is delusional. The data does not support this. Even if masking works at some level, and I'm sure it does help at some level for sure. I mean, I believe that it does. But to stop this? No. I mean, who knows? 10%, 20% reduction in cases over a period of time. But it's not even clear that reduction protects those, that those people don't get infected just outside the time frame you're looking at for the study. You're essentially delaying the spread of a virus that is spreading all throughout the population. But mask up all the time. That's the Biden plan. Now let's dive into what really is going to matter from the debate, if anything. Not clear. I mean, you'll never really be able to know. People talk about moving the needle and knockout punches and all these. And look, it's impossible to avoid the cliches. I'm not going to lie to you. People that do this for a living and you analyze these things, you try to come up with new ways of saying it. But There's a reason why we end up sounding like each other a lot on this. There's only so much you can say about a debate in terms of the analogies and stuff. But here's what I think is going to matter. Pennsylvania is a state where fossil fuels, oil, fracking matters a lot. Still a part of the industry there. And Pennsylvania is a critical state for whichever candidate's going to end up being president of the United States. And Biden's got a problem here because that's going to be a little bit like when Hillary Clinton went to West Virginia and she said, well, if you work in the coal industry, get a new job. Something like that. It was something along those lines that she said. You know, she basically told people that they were on their own. If you work in the coal industry, we're going to have to, learn to code, or we'll train you in something else. That did not go over well for Hillary in West Virginia, as you may recall, or in the rest of the campaign, because then she tried to walk it back, and a moment of honesty that would haunt her. And of course, any real moment of honesty haunts a Clinton. They hate that. It's like garlic for a vampire. But last night, Trump with Biden had this exchange about fracking and oil. Play 16.
And what about fracking?
All right,
Now
let me allow Vice President Biden to respond.
I never said I oppose fracking.
You said it on tape.
I did. Show the tape. Put it on your website.
I'll put it on.
Put it on the website.
Okay. Ask and ye shall receive, Joe Biden. Trump did, in fact, put it on the website. You want to hear whether Joe Biden has a problem with fracking or not? He's like, yeah, let's see what you got, buddy. Give me your best shot. This is like the guy that says, give me your best shot, and then he gets knocked out cold in the bar from the guy who gives him his best shot. Play 17.
Would there be any place for fossil fuels, including coal and fracking, in a Biden administration?
No, we would work it out. We would make sure it's eliminated and no more subsidies for either one of those. I guarantee we're going to end fossil fuel. No new fracking.
I'd gradually move away from fracking.
And I think it's critically important on day one that we end any fossil fuel leases on public lands.
What about, say, stopping fracking and stopping pipeline infrastructure?
Exactly. They want to do the same thing I want to do. They want to phase out fossil fuels, and we're going to phase out fossil fuels.
There's no question I'm in favor of banning fracking.
Now, it's hard to really cover this without going very, very deep into the details. But this is a religious belief for the left. I mean, not just the climate change issue, which we'll get to, but specifically fracking. I mean, they really think that fracking is evil. And in reality, fracking is the reason that the United States, in many ways, has been in such a place of unparalleled energy and economic dominance for the last 10 or 15 years. It was hugely helpful to us after the financial downturn, and the technology has been around since the 1940s, right? You inject liquid, 99% water and sand, a tiny amount of lubricant chemicals into shale formations, right? That creates small fractures, which allows the extraction of oil or natural gas from the sites where the oil derrick and well had been removed. But there's been an expanded utilization of this. You get more than 90%, okay, listen to me on this one, 90% of American oil and gas wells currently in use are hydraulically fractured. And America is now a global energy superpower because of it. Now, this is so noteworthy in many ways because it reminds me of the discussion we're having now about experts and science. Remember all the talk about peak oil? We used to be told that we were going to reach peak oil, right around now, actually. I mean, we were worried about peak oil stretching back for decades. And geopolitical strategists became obsessed with this in America. And we, in fact, even made national security decisions based upon our access to oil because we were so worried we were going to run out. But that meant that we cared too much about Middle Eastern dictatorships and the whole Mideast region. Why did we find ourselves there? Because of the energy. Because of what it did to the global energy markets. What was Iran's big trump card, pardon the phrase, so to speak, when we started to have more and more problems with, well, we've had problems with them since 1979, but when things started to ratchet up in recent years, it was always they could shut down the Straits of Hormuz, shut down the global energy market. 25% of oil goes through the Straits of Hormuz, so that was going to be a big problem. Oil was over $100 a barrel, my friends, in 2011. Go back 10 years. This technology has been incredible, but people absolutely love, on the left, they love to treat it like it's some kind of a monster, and Biden can't get away with it. Biden can't bring himself to say, you know what, this whole anti-oil thing that we've got is lunacy. The cheap price of energy and the fracking that allows that to be the case, and the domestic supply that we now have, results in cheaper, better, faster, everything in the economy around you. The room you are in is better climate controlled. The food that you are eating is more efficiently grown and brought to you and stored. All of this because of fossil fuels. This obsession with solar and windmills is lunacy. But the Democrat Party is absolutely devoted to it, and they just don't care. In fact, Joe Biden starts out now. This is the thing you have to say. Climate change is an existential threat. It is absolutely not an existential threat, and it's a silly, embarrassing thing to say. But that's now a thing that you must say to be a Democrat who's in good standing with his own side. You're not allowed to say anything else about it. In fact, they'll laugh at you. They'll think there's something wrong with you. And then that brings me to my problem with the question last night about, not just a question about it, that the climate change in these debates is always a segment unto itself. It's always a section. We're going to have a part of the debate on climate change. Why? Why? This is dumb. This is dumb. And I know people, oh my gosh, you're such a... Yeah? Who wants to place bets? That's, I think, the only way that we can start to really see people stop this nonsense, is if we created an exchange where you could place bets. The climate catastrophist can say what's going to happen. You know, so for example, the movie An Inconvenient Truth, you look at Florida underwater by the year 2030. All right. I'll put 10 grand right now on Florida's not going to be underwater in 10 years. Who wants to take that bet, right? That would be the only way that you'd start to see people have to back off this nonsense, where they were demonstrably wrong and suffer for being wrong. Because what you have now is they're wrong every 10 years, but every 10 years they change the prediction for the next 10 years, and that's what we're supposed to focus on. Oh, we didn't get it right the last time, but we'll get it right this time. And this extends even to COVID and to the COVID lockdowns. But you've got Trump pointing out that Fauci is a guy who we're supposed to listen to about everything. This guy's been wrong tons of times. This is from the debate last night, play 11.
This week, you called Dr. Anthony Fauci, the nation's best-known infectious disease expert, quote, a disaster. You described him and other medical experts as, quote, idiots. If you're not listening to them, who are you listening to as you fight this?
I'm listening to all of them, including Anthony. I get along very well with Anthony. But he did say, don't wear masks. He did say, as you know, this is not going to be a problem. I think he's a Democrat, but that's okay. He said this is not going to be a problem. We are not going to have a problem at all. When Joe says that, I said, Anthony Fauci said, and others, and many others, and I'm not knocking him a lot. Nobody knew. Look, nobody knew what this thing was. Nobody knew where it was coming from, what it was. We've learned a lot. But Anthony said, don't wear masks. Now he wants to wear masks. Anthony also said, if you look back, exact words, here's his exact words. This is no problem. This is going to go away soon. So he's allowed to make mistakes. He happens to be a good person.
Why is it such a problem to point out that Fauci has been wrong many times during this? Isn't that just speaking truth? The guy's been wrong a lot. A lot of people have been wrong a lot. But here's the point. Fauci is given a dispensation from the lib media because he's a catastrophist. And he just always gives you the most negative interpretation and doesn't care, you know, the economic damage that's going on in the country, the ruined lives, the drug abuse. He's just, that's not as bad. It's not as big a deal has this disease, wear a mask, right? This is all we ever hear from this guy. And the libs like it because he's a useful tool with which they can try to bludgeon the Trump campaign, which is what they've been doing. But he's been wrong, and they forgive him entirely. In fact, they forbid you from even addressing the fact that he has been wrong. Meanwhile, Trump, if he said back in March, look, I think it's going to fade out by the summer, or look, I think we're going to beat this thing soon, or whatever Trumpian thing he said, he's a mass murderer because of that. So Fauci, who's an infectious disease expert, can tell everybody and be given this unbelievable authority to basically make policy for the whole country. He could say, don't wear a mask. And all the people that didn't wear masks because of that, that's all forgiven and forgotten. But Trump says, I think this is going to go away. Don't worry about it that much. And he's a monster and a murderer. That's why this matters, because they have no standard that they're applying. Fauci is great. Trump is awful. Based on what? Based on Orange Man bad.
Had a good relationship with Hitler before he, in fact, invaded Europe, the rest of Europe. Come on. The reason he would not meet with President Obama is because President Obama said, we're going to talk about denuclearization. We're not going to legitimize you, and we're going to continue to put stronger and stronger sanctions on you. That's why he wouldn't meet with us.
There's Biden the historian for you. We had a good relationship with Hitler before he invaded Europe. No, not true, but okay. Biden trying to be clever is a risky thing for everybody. It's not something that's going to go well, as we've seen so many times in the past. But on foreign policy, the truth is you line up, and there was no real discussion of it last night other than a couple of brief moments. We just played one of them for you. You line up what Trump has done in his first 4 years and what the Obama team did in their first 4 years, and just Trump is better. It's just better for America. He's got things to show for his time in office that matter. He's got peace deals. He's got trade deals, the USMCA trade deal. He's taken on China in a way that was desperately needed, and previous administrations wouldn't do it. So let's just say, I will dispense with this for now, but there's really no comparison. Trump is better on foreign policy than his predecessors going back even into the Bush administration. So there you have that. And now you've also got some other issues that came up, like healthcare and immigration. And this was so interesting because you remember the big push in the early days of the Democrat primary. Doesn't that feel like it was a different lifetime now? That Democrat primary, the polling was supposed to show that Americans all wanted Medicare for all. And it was very dishonest because the way they would do the polling is, do you want Medicare for all? Well, that's like saying to me, do I want to eat a lot of chocolate cake every night? I mean, the answer is, of course, yes. But what about the downside of being able to fit into my clothing? What about the downside of losing your private health care? Because with Medicare for all, you will lose your private health care plan. And now you're at the mercy of the state. Now they determine what doctors you see, where you can go, and all the rest of it. So that's why that poll about, would you like Medicare for all? It's like, yes. Would you like something that's free and we don't tell you what the cost is? Sure. The moment people realize the cost, they go, not so into it. So Biden moved away from that because I do think the Democrats were at least politically savvy enough to figure out that going into an election where you're promising to take away the private health care plans of 130 million people was a very bad idea. So what does blue-collar Joe have in store for us if he becomes president? That's not Medicare for all. What's the big what we're going to get? Well, play 7.
What I'm going to do is pass Obamacare with a public option. It'll become BIDENCARE. The public option is an option that says that if you, in fact, do not have the wherewithal if you qualify for Medicaid and you do not have the wherewithal in your state to get Medicaid, you automatically are enrolled, providing competition for insurance companies. That's what's going to happen. Secondly, we're going to make sure we reduce the premiums and reduce drug prices by making sure that there's competition that doesn't exist now by allowing the Medicare to negotiate drug prices with the insurance companies. Thirdly, The idea that I want to eliminate private insurance, the reason why I had such a fight with 20 candidates for the nomination was I support private insurance. That's why not one single person with private insurance would lose their insurance under my plan, nor did they under Obamacare.
That's a huge lie. I really wanted you to hear that whole thing so you could hear Joe Biden. He's clearly laying this out the way that he was trained to in his many days of basement hiding debate prep. But this is a jaw-dropping lie. In fact, we've already established this because it was considered I think it was either Politico or PolitiFact or Washington Post Pinocchio lie of the year during the Obama administration, when Obama said, if you like your plan, you can keep your plan. Joe Biden just repeated that lie last night. Total lie. Millions of people lost their plans, and some of them, a large portion of them, were forced to take on crappier plans that they paid more for in the individual market because they make enough money that they're considered a subsidizer of other people in the individual market that Obamacare forced them into were subsidizees. That's what ended up happening. But there's a bigger point here about healthcare that I want to make, and that is what happens when you set up a public option and what that really means, because, friends, this is just progressive incrementalism all over again.